40 years, we have gone through here in the United States a massive redistribution of wealth from the bottom and the middle to the top. You all know about our super rich, like Elon Musk or Bill Gates or Jeffrey Bezos, people whose wealth is counted in the hundreds of billions of dollars, people whose personal wealth is greater than that of many countries in the world. This is taking us back, for example, to the ancient Egypt of the pharaohs in terms of what some people had and what the mass of people didn't. Mr. Trump filled the vacuum, and he did it in two ways. Number one, he proposed things that your normal Democrat and Republican wouldn't dare because it was outside the consensus. But even more important was the tone in which he did it. His tone was anger. His target was the Republican and then the Democratic establishments, which is what people were angry and wanted change from. And he kept saying, look at me, look how I talk, and vote for me because I'm somehow expressing your bitterness, your anger. Think of his government as an immense political theater that had very little to do with policy. I'll give you an example. He liked to refer to immigrants as an invasion of criminals. The United States is a country built on 200 years of immigration. The native indigenous people here were either killed or sequestered in tiny reservations where they still live under the most extreme poverty. But to refer to them as an invasion of criminals was dramatic, was something that Republicans and Democrats would never have said, whatever they actually did. And so he said, I'm going to stop them. I'm going to build a wall, and I'm going to make Mexico pay for the wall. Now, he said that 8 years ago. Has that wall been built? No. Have the Mexicans paid for it? Not a penny. But you know, by the time people think about that, he is on to the next one. So he arrives at the crisis in which the Israelis have bombed Gaza on a scale that leads people around the world to use terms like mass murder or genocide or all the rest of it. And he knows that the Israelis have failed to destroy Hamas and how bitter this issue has become all over the world. So he comes in with something nobody else would dare think, let alone say. He's going to take Gaza and make it into a beachfront resort area, which would require removing 1.8 million Gazan citizens. He doesn't mind saying any of those things because look at the attention it got him. He's the naughty boy. He's the one who, wow, what an idea. He loves that. And the United States, if it's going to forcibly evict Palestinians, is basically following the same policy that Israel did. It didn't work for Israel, and I don't see any reason why it would work for the United States either. And it could certainly provoke a large part of American culture to be unwilling to pay for that, be unwilling to tolerate it, and to be more and more persuaded on the side of the Palestinians. The United States is in trouble around this issue. In the UN, there are vote after vote where it's the whole world versus the United States and Israel. It's not just the Arab world. It's not just the Muslim world. And I noticed that even the European politicians felt the need to express opposition to the Trumpian notion of taking over Gaza. The American empire is declining. There's no way out of that. The United States lost the war in Vietnam. It lost the war in Afghanistan. It lost the war in Iraq, and it is in the process of losing the war in Ukraine. And now the capitalist system of the United States, which in many ways relied on the empire, is weakened because the empire is declining. The Brics countries, China and its allies, now account for about 60% of the world's people. The United States' population is 4.5% of the world's people. That should stop everyone in their tracks. If you add up the GDP of the Brics countries, and then you add up next to it the GDP of the G7, is now significantly larger than the total for the United States and the G7. The wealth in the world has shifted. The United States is now number 2, not number 1. The program of sanctioning and tariffs is not working, because the other side has options that didn't exist before, because they have become relatively much more powerful and wealthy than they ever were before. And now they're constantly working out collective policies. The United States has tried to stop it, hasn't succeeded. The United States doesn't want to keep losing wars. It hasn't succeeded. And I believe Mr. Trump is in part trying to come up with some offset. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to understand why he would come up with, I'm going to take back the Panama Canal, or I'm going to take Greenland, or I'm going to make Canada the 51st state, or I'm going to hit Mexico and Canada with 25% tariffs. This is a kind of renewal of colonialism when everywhere else in the world, excepting Israel, the movement is against colonialism. These are signs of a desperate society, unable and increasingly worried and looking for anything it can do, and it's consuming its own allies. The people of Mexico and Canada are now expressing anti-American feelings that you used to associate with other parts of the world. This is not looking good. Both spokesmen for Mrs. Sheinbaum in Mexico and Trudeau, who's still sort of the leader in Canada, they both made sure that their top assistants gave press conferences the same day explaining that why they were happy to allocate 10,000 troops to the border is that there are already 15,000 troops there. They agreed to do nothing so long as he could perform his theater. One thing is clear, that over the years, as more and more military type barriers were created, did it stop the migration? Not at all. Did it stop the flow of drugs into the country? Not at all. This is silly. And every president has to say, I'm going to do this. And it makes no difference at all. Let me give you another example. For the last 12 presidents, every single one has said, I'm going to bring manufacturing back into the United States. None of them achieved it. And Mr. Trump won't either. Tariffs have been used on and off for centuries. Sometimes they seem to work, and other times they don't. And even when they seem to work, it's never quite clear whether it was the tariff that had this nice result or something else that was going on at the same time that made that happen. Bottom line, to imagine that tariffs are some magic bullet that will solve our problems can only be uttered by someone totally unaware of this literature. One of the assumptions given by Mr. Trump as a justification is the following. During his first presidency, the overwhelmingly most important act that was accomplished was the Tax Reduction Act of December 2017. It particularly helped corporations and rich individuals. Those tax cuts came at the end of what I mentioned earlier, a period of redistribution of wealth from the bottom and the middle to the top. In other words, what Mr. Trump achieved was giving a tremendous tax cut to the people who needed it least because they had just come off of 40 years of redistribution of wealth into their hand. A stunningly obtuse achievement. I'm being as nice as I can. In the law that was written, all of these lovely tax cuts expire in the year 2025. So Mr. Trump is devoted to continuing them, because if he didn't, the people who funded him would be getting a tax increase that would be big for them. They don't want that. And he secured their support by promising he would make a priority. Well, if that's the case, then the government can't get that revenue. And the government is already running huge deficits in excess of $1 trillion a year. And our national debt is now about 130% of our annual, which is dangerous territory and is something the whole world knows. So what Mr. Trump says is, I'm going to hit tariffs, and that tariff is going to raise a ton of money to compensate for the fact that I'm not going to let those tax cuts expire. There it is. Does this sound reasonable? If you don't know anything, it does. The assumption is that when you put, say, a 25% tariff, what that means is goods coming in to the United States from Canada or Mexico or China are now much more expensive the day that tariff goes into effect than they were the day before. Something you bought last week for $1 will now cost you $1.25. The $1 goes to Canada to pay for the good. The 25 cents is a tax which you, the American buyer, pay to your own government. For the last century, the Republican Party has made as its number one appeal that we are the party that doesn't tax you. Mr. Trump is now becoming a major taxer. People ought to be scratching their head. Wait a minute, I thought this was a party against taxes. They are the party for taxes. And the Democrats, who used to be the party willing to tax so they could provide social services, are in the position of opposing the tax. Where's the money going to come from for the social services you want? Things are crazy, and I want to keep going back. They're not crazy because Americans are stupid. They're no more or less stupid than anybody else, or venal, or none of it. It's because their economy is declining and their empire is disappearing, and they have real competitors. The United States has never had an economic competitor in the last century. No one should make a mistake about Russia. Russia was never an economic competitor of the United States. Let me give you the statistic right now. The GDP of the United States in 2024 was somewhere between 25 and 28 trillion dollars. The GDP of Russia was somewhere between 2 and 3 trillion dollars. You understand? Nowhere near close. The GDP of China is about 18 or 20 trillion. That's a competitor. Russia has nuclear weapons, very important. Russia's a huge, rich country in raw materials, very important. And Russia has political power, also very important. And Russia has a damn good military, as we are learning. But economically, no. Only in the Cold War mentality of the United States, who was the Russian menace made into something economic, political, but that's propaganda. All right, back to the tariffs. Americans, if they have to suddenly pay $1.25 for what they used to get from Mexico or Canada for $1, millions of those Americans are not going to buy the Canadian good that now costs $1.25. Why? Because they can buy a Swedish equivalent, a Guatemalan equivalent, which didn't go up by 25% because there's no tariff on them. My guess, and most economists would say, they're going to solve the problem of the tariff by evading it. So the promise that it's going to make a lot of money is a promise made by a person who cannot know that, because nobody can. And now let me add some things. You have made the Canadian people very angry. He keeps talking about them being the 51st state. They're not going to do business with the United States. They're going to wonder, what are they going to do next? I don't want to be dependent on the United States as a market. I'm going to do my business somewhere else. One of the most important things Canada sells to the United States is oil and gas. Well, you know who else in the world wants to buy oil and gas wherever they can find it? The Chinese. All the Canadians need to do is offload it in Vancouver and take it across the Pacific, and they get to China. That's where it's going to go. The Chinese will pay for it, and the Canadians will say, since the Chinese have never threatened a tariff, the Chinese have never suggested Canada become a province of their country, that's a safer bet. Very dangerous what Mr. Trump is doing.